what was so amazing about it was here we were in a place that was very foreign to us with a woman who was speaking a language we had never heard before, that we didn't understand a word of, doing rituals we had never experienced. And the whole thing felt so authentic. It was so powerful. All of us really felt Dalia's presence, felt like what she was saying, felt very much to us like she was having this conversation with Dalia.
Welcome to A Place of Yes, a podcast about how I moved through my darkest hour. And for me, that was in channeling my grief into good. Welcome to the show. So I am so excited today to welcome back Jessica Fein, who was a guest on season 1. She is the author of Breathtaking, a memoir of family, dreams, and broken genes. And she's the host of her own podcast called I Don't Know How You Do It. Welcome back, Jessica. I'm so happy to have you here.
I'm so happy to be invited back. This is like encore.
Yay. And what I'm super excited about is that, our first conversations, we explored all the things we have in common, right? Like we have child loss, we have rare disease, we have this belief that we live with this horrible grief, but that we also can laugh and have joy and, all of those things. So I feel like when I first connected with you, I was like, finally, someone out there that understands me. I love that. So I encourage anybody who's listening who has not listened to the season 1 episode to go back and do so. And the topic I want to talk with you is about your recent trip to Guatemala. So can you share about your time in Guatemala?
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for inviting me to speak about that because it's still so fresh in my mind and was so meaningful that I'm like, yes, I want to talk about it. So just to back up in case anybody didn't hear the other episode, my husband and I adopted our 3 children from Guatemala. So Guatemala holds a very special place in our hearts. We had traveled together to Guatemala 5 times. But each time was for baby business, let's call it that. So we had really only been, with the exception of a couple of hours in Antigua, which, by the way, is not Antigua, the Caribbean island, which a lot of people have asked me. So that's why I say that. We had only been in Guatemala City, and that is not seeing the country. We had not been back since we brought our youngest son home in 2007. So it had been
okay.
And we had always told the kids, as soon as you're ready, let us know, we'll go. We wanted them to be the ones to say, we want to do this now. Meanwhile, in 2022, our middle child, Dalia, died. And that was obviously, as you said, the topic of our past conversation from a rare disease called Murph syndrome. So here we are coming up on the 3-year anniversary. And our other 2 kids said they wanted to go to Guatemala. So we went to Guatemala for 9 days and we saw a lot of the country and just learned so much more than we had ever learned in all of the previous trips, because of course our focus was so single-minded. One of the things that was really important to us is we wanted to do something to honor Dalia's memory while we were in Guatemala. Kind of thought through several different ways that could look. Ultimately decided to do a traditional Mayan fire ceremony, which is something that is done in the Mayan population, not only to make an offering for a relative or a loved one who has died, it can also be done for somebody's health or business reasons. I mean, there's a lot of different reasons why you might do a traditional fire ceremony. We arranged for this to happen, and it was amazing. We were in a place called Chichicastenango. And first of all, I will say that the cemeteries in Guatemala are stunning. So they start off underground, but it's very small space. So they end up going above ground, and they are so colorful because they will paint whatever color the person's favorite color was. And
that's awesome.
Beautiful. And they just
like
have
the
personality.
opposite of here.
The total opposite here, which is like somber, gray, stone, it's just burst of color. It's magnificent. Adjacent to this cemetery is a place called Buktan, which is where this world and the next world meet, is what is kind of like about it. And it's really like just a gigantic lot with different areas where offerings can be done around the lot. Now, these are done by a priest or a priestess, and you can see who they are because they're wearing very traditional garb, including a specific hat that only the priest or the priestess are wearing. It was interesting because we got there well before the priestess we were meeting, and we were watching and seeing some of the other ceremonies taking place. And it was very interesting. We had a translator with us, and we saw this one guy a priest pour Coca-Cola on the altar and then alcohol, like, I don't know, it was whiskey or something, and learned that what they'll do often is take like a drink that their person loved and pour it, because it's all going up in the smoke, in theory, right, to the spirits.
Oh, wow. I am speechless almost. That's so cool.
Yeah, it was so interesting. Yeah. So our priestess was named Priestess Juana. Mayan dialects, it's interesting because there are actually 22 different languages. So a lot of times people can't even speak to each other. It's not even like they necessarily have that much in common in the language. But in any event, so Priestess Juana speaks a language called Quiche. It's very well known there, and likely is the language Dalia would have heard as a baby.
Okay.
Because Dalia was 6 months when we brought her home.
Okay.
So Priestess Juana arrives. She's an older woman. And it was very interesting because, first of all, she arrived in a tuk-tuk, which is a 3-wheeled vehicle that's open on the sides, and they're all over in Guatemala. She didn't know anything really about our story ahead of time. So in any event, the first thing that she does is she comes and she prepares the altar. And so the first thing is they put sugar around first you put flower petals around the outside. And then sugar, because you want to have something sweet going up. And then all of these candies and incense, and then candles. And then for the next 45 minutes, she's chanting in Quiche. She's lit this whole offering is inflamed. And what was so interesting is that what she is doing is she is reading the direction of the smoke, the direction of the fire, the shape of the ashes to get her messages from the spirits and from Dalia. And she is then sharing them with our translator. And we were getting some messages, What was so amazing about it was here we were in a place that was very foreign to us with a woman who was speaking a language we had never heard before, that we didn't understand a word of, doing rituals we had never experienced. And the whole thing felt so authentic. What was interesting to me is that Dalia had a very traditional Jewish funeral, and as did every member of my family who's died. And yet this one, where it was all so foreign to us, felt so powerful and so authentic and did not feel performative. And it was so powerful. All of us really felt Dalia's presence, felt like what she was saying, felt very much to us like she was having this conversation with Dalia.
I mean, I'm almost like speechless because I literally have chills.
I am not much of a crier, but we were all incredibly, incredibly moved. Both of our other kids said, this just really felt right. It was like a missing piece, something that kind of needed to happen and we didn't even know it. And it's really interesting, we were so in the moment and it was so powerful. And I do wonder if we were to do other ceremonial rituals in other cultures, would they be as powerful, half as powerful? How much of it was that we knew we were in Dalia's homeland? I don't know. I mean, I think that that's a really interesting thing to delve into.
I mean, I think both of those things are huge because to think about for her first 6 months, she was most likely hearing that language in that country. Like there has to be, depending how far you lean into these things, right? Like when Jake first died, I was reading all kinds of books about afterlife or multiple lives. And I got really wrapped up into this idea. One of the books I read was kind of like sometimes you're so connected to people and it's because, 400 years ago you were friends or you were animals that were all, and right. All of these
Your
kinds
souls
of
were
things.
Connected.
Your souls were somehow connected. And prior to Jake dying, I never gave that an ounce of thought. But when I read those things, I really thought there was a lot to it. And there was this whole piece too about like how kids choose their parents. And again, I don't know. I've got to think that you being there in that specific place with that specific language had to make it more powerful for you and for her. Right?
I would think so. And I love the idea of kids choosing their parents because one of the things I've always said as an adoptive mom is we all chose each other. Yeah.
Which I think is awesome. So when you guys went down, did you know you were going to be doing this or did you get to Guatemala and say, oh, this experience, like this is an experience we can have?
I arranged it.
When you got that? Okay, you did.
So we knew we wanted to do something. In thinking about kind of what that something would be, this emerged as the right thing.
And this is personal, so you don't have to answer this, but like, what did Dalia say? Like,
well, it's quite lengthy because, as I was saying earlier, we didn't have a great method of translation. There was a little bit of a language barrier. So actually what I was able to do was to arrange for Juana to give a verbal download to her son, Miguel, who actually speaks English. And so I worked on this for like a while when I got back because I knew we were missing something. Okay. And then I got a very lengthy recording from him in English. So that was great. But the highlights were she was really happy that we were doing this and that, she was not in pain and talking to us about what she wanted us to be focused on now and how she wanted us to feel now. And so for her, she wanted us, my favorite thing I'll tell you that she said was that she wanted us to have crazy fun like we used to. And so it was really beautiful.
That's amazing. And you just felt her, like you knew it was her.
Yeah. It's interesting because I have seen a medium. And I've had different communications that are like, I have totally gone on deep dives of, could they have known this? Is there any way that this is on record? Could they have figured this out? You know what I mean? All that kind of stuff. This wasn't that. Nothing they said was like, there's no way. But the feeling was so powerful. And, one of the things that I think about is how much does it matter?
Because something is there regardless of the
right.
actual,
and what's the objective?
Yeah.
The objective is for you to feel the presence of your person.
This is something that, so my Jake's been gone 14 years. In the very beginning, there were friends who were like, oh, I have a medium for you to see. Or like, I have a lot of friends who have gone and had these experiences without even like a huge person that has died. I'm not scared of it. I absolutely am terrified of it, which is why I haven't done it. I think I would have gone for anybody else. Like, it's not the idea of it that scares me. It's the piece that it's my son that scares me.
That's and so I don't interesting. Know. Well, I will tell you, I don't know how I would have responded had I not already gone when my father died. So I had seen a medium, and that meeting, which was an hour, was one of the most powerful hours I've ever had in my life, and absolutely 100% had the most profound impact on me, what happened during that conversation, which he did not even know I was present because it was my sister who did this phone thing with him and then made me dial in from this other phone. And so I was there and he didn't even know I was there. I mean, maybe he did because he's a medium, so who knows? But,
they know everything now. Yeah.
Right. But it was incredible. And what he said, that there is absolutely no way he could have known, and the way he captured my father's personality, it was mind-blowing. I mean, even my husband, who is the biggest skeptic, I had recorded the whole thing, couldn't believe it when he heard it.
So that probably made it easier. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I'm scared to do it the first time with Jake. And I'm like, this sounds so foolish even when I said it out loud, but I'm like, what if he is mad at me? What if he says something mean? What if it like makes me cry in a bad way? Like, and I don't live my life like that. You know what I mean? Like, but something about this seems so, like, I feel so fragile about it.
They're not going to say something that's going to, I mean, I don't think that's their objective.
I want to do it. Like, I feel like after all this time, I'm ready to do it. Like, I feel like,
you know, that we are totally going to have to do it together.
Well, now you're in. Like, now you're in. Now there's no way out.
Right? I did see, God, was it after? I can't remember if it was. No, I went to back to that medium once with a friend.
The one that did your dad?
Yes, it was that same medium. But it was like a group situation, okay? So it was a room in a hotel and there were a lot of people. And my friend has a son who was a classmate of Dalia's. And at this point, Dalia was going to a school that was for very intense medical complexities. And this is a nonverbal child in a wheelchair, as was Dalia at the time. And this medium got so confused because it was a room of like 15 people. And and I think maybe there was even like somebody sitting in between us or something, because he starts talking to one of us and then he's feeling who, you know, and describing them, even though they were still, and her son still is alive. But, you know, you're the mother. And then it's like, but wait, like it was just totally confused because he was like feeling it off of both
like
of us.
Yep.
And he's like getting signals crossed. I could just imagine if you and I were, you know, together, somebody would be like, wait.
And maybe Dalia and Jake would be up there like screwing with us.
That's what I was going to say.
Yeah. So I definitely feel like I've been thinking about this, right? So I've been thinking about it a long time. I saw your experience, what you had shared, and I was like, okay, this is sort of a sign. This other piece that is also happening, and actually just last night, and if I am tech savvy enough, I can pull it up. So a couple times Jake has come to me in dreams. Had not happened in a very long time. And then I would say maybe about a month ago or so, he came to me in this dream. And I used to write these letters to Jake. And it was kind of like I decided it would be the final letter to Jake. But basically, he was older. He just kept saying, oh, and it kind of freaked me out because I never heard his voice because he was nonverbal. And like I only ever know his like baby babbling. Like I never knew a voice. But in this dream, he was like, thank you, I'm good. Like, I'm fine, thank you. I woke up like, and I put notes like on my phone. And then it was like, tell dad, thank you, I'm fine. It was Jake. Like it just was unreal. So I've been thinking about it even more because I was like, okay, like he's probably like, Mom, get your shit together and come see me. Come see me because like here I am, like I'm having to like bust through and do all the work. Last night I had another dream. He was in my dream last night. So this is what I wrote. Like this doesn't make a ton of sense, but I remember it was like unleash dreams. And I remember thinking that the dreams, like him coming to me in dreams is like unleashing all these fears I sort of have and like making peace with it. Because I think for a long time too, I worried, and I'm curious if you had any of this feeling, like that feeling of like guilt and did I do enough and should I do more? And I don't live in that space, but I fall back on that space. So I wrote down Jake because he was a dream. He was a baby in the dream. And then Doris, that was my grandmother. And my grandmother passed away. Like Jake had just gotten sick. And she kind of was like, well, no, it's my time to go. And then my Uncle Bruce was like holding him and like resting with him. I don't know why. Like that significance is weird. And he was just
is Uncle Bruce alive or not?
He is alive. He doesn't have kids. And I think he was always really impacted by like me losing my child. Then my friends who are actually coming in tonight to visit. And then I wrote down Italy. So I have no idea what that is.
Oh my God. Well, you better go to Italy and check it out.
So I was like, is Jake in Italy? I just feel like he is like knocking on my door being like, come on, you're finally getting it. Like you're starting to figure things out.
And I love this. Yes, he is. I think he is. And I think that you have to go check it out and see. I think that you will leave actually feeling relief. Look, again, I'm not like some great believer. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure this stuff out myself.
Same way, right?
But I will tell you that I have had an experience after my sister died where there was a lot that I felt really guilty about and left that meeting feeling like a weight had been lifted.
I was afraid of like those feelings of guilt and for a long time, like buried them or just got distracted or didn't. And then all of a sudden with all this talk I've done in the last year with the podcast and just sort of the shift, not that I ever hit it, it wasn't at the surface. And now it's just bubbling over, frankly. Like, I mean, like.
That's really interesting because I feel like I have talked a lot more and stepped into a lot more the whole grief space than I had even with all the losses I've had. And even like the first year after losing Dalia, it has opened my mind and opened my eyes to just so much.
I agree. It makes me wonder sometimes, like, what took me so long?
I don't know. What's the point of that, right?
Yeah.
Like you're where you are now for a reason.
Do you feel, since you've had that experience with your boys and your husband, like, do you feel like you're more connected? I mean, that's a beautiful thing to share.
Do you know what I mean? A little bit of both. Yeah. I mean, we definitely came back. Like I got kind of sick at the end of the trip and then Rob had the stomach flu and we've got this and that, reality, but I feel like what we shared together there and look, what we shared together in our lives, like that is such a bond. I feel like we're connected in a way that nobody would understand because what we went through was so intense for so long.
Yeah. It's just a different perspective than most of your son's friends probably have and that, their families have. Like I feel, I see that with Ethan.
I'm curious, do you know how early on in meeting new people does he share his personal story?
So this is actually really interesting. So Jake died December 8th. So he just had his sophomore year, but his freshman year, we had always done something around the weekend of December 8th. So like from that first year after Jake died, we would either go to like New York City or we would go to this place called Lake Placid. Sometimes we'd go to Montreal, like places that we used to travel to with Jake. And that winter of his freshman year was going to be the first time that, we were not going to be together. And I was really not sure. Like, I was like, should we go see him? Should we leave him be? Like, I didn't know. And then Brian and I ended up going to Las Vegas. And I was like, so I booked us a trip to Vegas. And I remember saying, Ethan, for sure, if you want to be with us, I will put you, there's an airport right at Syracuse, like, come spend a day with us. We're going to go to like a football game. Like, you're absolutely invited, can make like a last minute decision. Like, this is special, but no pressure. Because I wanted him to figure it out on his own. And then he said to me, he's like, I'm not going to join you guys in Vegas. He's like, but I would love to go to New York City. Can I go with Leah, who is his girlfriend? And he's like, I just don't want to be in the dorms with everybody wondering what's wrong with me. And the ones who know, like, he didn't want the ones who knew about Jake, like, checking on him. And he didn't want to have to explain how he was feeling. So that doesn't really answer your question, but it means like he was kind of, I don't think he's struggling with how to tell people and when. One of the things that he's very connected with his girlfriend with, she has a sister with Down syndrome. He was like, Mom, guess what? Like, he was kind of excited about it, but I think that was this bond. So he told her right away, like when they were sort of just talking on the phone. And I think that just feels very safe to him.
Yes, I totally get that and have something kind of similar on our end with that too. Yeah.
I wonder, like, I know all his friends now know, but I wonder when that conversation happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just such a weird and hard thing to bring up. I remember when I was in college, I had a friend who had told me he had had a baby sibling who had died. I remember being so ill-equipped for that conversation. I kind of wish I could go back in time now and be the me that I am now.
Yes.
Because I remember, sure, I said something foolish or whatever. Like, I don't even remember what I said, but I do remember feeling uncomfortable. Like, I hadn't known anybody who had been in that situation before. And, now I look back and I'm like, my God, he must have really trusted me to have shared that with me. I hope I was at least like not overtly offensive in any way.
It's interesting you say that because my freshman year, my roommate, her mother had committed suicide 18 months before our freshman year. And I remember, like, I had at that point in my life, like, I was 17 years old. I had not really had anything like that, even remotely close to it. I don't really remember how I responded, but I remember that we ended up, her mom's name was Pam. She would be like, oh, Pam would be so pissed if she knew what I was doing or something. Like, we would just always talk about her as though she was there. And it's funny because I look back and I was like, I love when people talk about Jake. I'm sure I screwed up a lot of things in that thing, but at least we said her name. Do you know what I mean? Like,
at least you said her name.
At least I said
that.
her name.
Yeah.
So I am wondering, does this make you want to go to mediums more? Like, do you want to like do this all over again? Or was it so great that you're like, do you know what I mean? Because sometimes when something good is, it's like, oh my God, I get greedy. It's like, I want more. Other times you kind of know that that was like end on a high note.
I'm very, very fascinated by all this stuff at this point. And I think it's because I have had so much loss. And when we look at how every culture has its own way of communicating, honoring, etc., both every culture, every geography, all through time, and so to me, it's a great big question mark that like this huge, brightly colored, like your sweater question mark that's just like, check me out, because, if there is some great thing to discover, I'd like to discover it. I mean, for myself, I don't mean
no,
like,
I know.
Yeah.
You are the one. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. It's going to be like, well, Einstein had the theory of relativity and then I discovered, you know what I mean? So I'm not talking about that. I just mean like my curiosity is knocking.
I do. I think we have to do something because I feel like I am so ready for it now. And like I said, I was always open for this stuff, right? Like always, but not with Jake. And now I just feel like he's like, come on, Mom, let's do it.
I'm also interested in the way that we feel connected and honor their legacy in real earthbound ways, and which you're doing in such a gorgeous, gorgeous way. And I imagine that the work you're doing makes you feel more connected to Jake all the time.
It does. It does a lot of times. I don't know how to say this, but like, so there's some kids that we work with and some of their families have been on the show and they are Jake to me almost, right? Like, and to me, they're my most touching, like I'm most connected to those families. had Jake lived, had Jake like been older, he would be not exactly, but very similar to them. And we would be having such intertwined journeys, you know? So I sometimes struggle with that though, because I get jealous, right? Like I love the work we're doing in his memory. I just sometimes I see the changes that the like world, medicine, technology, all of those things. And sometimes I'm like, if he could just have hung on a little longer. I sometimes think, and when I see Jake like in my dream as like the one dream where he was older, he was kind of just standing there, like I guess what he would look like, you know, and he was not sick and he was not any of it. Last night he was still Jake because he was like being held. But
I have dreams where Dalia's like walking and running and that kind of thing.
Do you
too.
really?
Yeah. And I love it, you know, but then you wake up and you're like, oh. Do you ever have dreams where you have some of the same things that Jake was struggling with? Meaning, I've had dreams where like I can't talk, or you know, where some of those symptoms. Yeah. You ever had that?
I have never had one.
That's not a fun one to have.
No, that can't be. No. Oh, that's interesting. So my mother is actually from Argentina. So I grew up going back and forth to Argentina. And when you were talking about the cemeteries, I remember being in Argentina and they're just they weren't, I don't remember them being quite as colorful, but they're just ornate and beautiful. And I feel like the closest place in our country that has that vibe is like New Orleans.
That's so interesting that you say that. Yes, because first of all, I've always felt that of all the places I've been in this country, and I haven't been to every state, but I've been to a lot. And I've always said New Orleans is the place that most feels to me like a different country. And also, of course, they have a lot of their own practices. I've been reading about that as well. And so there's definitely a lot of spiritual practices happening in New Orleans.
Well, and that's
going to be our road trip.
Well, I'm actually like, I'm kind of, it's because so every time we're there, we go to some of the different like voodoo shops. And like the last time we were there, like I was talking to someone and she was like, you know, what's your sign and what's this and blah, 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 blah. And she gave me this like little baggie of stuff that like I carry around in my purse. Although this is like classic Heather, I was like dumping out the purse because I was changing it. And then all the stuff went flying over because like the little satchel had opened. And then I'm like, okay, great. I was like, now. So I'm like trying to sweep it back in. And I'm like, A, I have no idea what this is. B, like, I'm sorry if this is pissing someone off. Like, I was like,
but maybe it was like releasing it into the air. And so it was doing even more of its magic. But yeah, I've been reading about all that, you know, voodoo and the traditional ceremonies. It's interesting. I don't know. I mean, I was in New Orleans one time and it was for Jazz Fest. It could not have been a more different time of my life, let's just put it that way. But I could definitely see going back.
There's a lot there. Like the cemeteries are, you know, because of the sea level, but they're all above, and they have, because of that, it lends itself more to like the decorations and the, you know, kind of
true, is a big part of their funeral
music.
practice.
And after I can't remember.
Funerals.
Yeah, I can't remember what it's called, what they do when they do those like walks, like the there's a name for it and I can't remember what it is. But we have been in New Orleans where like we've seen them go through and like everyone's invited to like join in and celebrate, and like it's just very cool.
Right. And there is something so great about the idea of it being joyous.
Yeah.
Which is very, very, very different from anything I've ever experienced personally, where it's really everything is driving towards solemnity and just, you know, having a real
super somber. And
yeah. And so the idea of like this celebration and music and joy, there's something compelling about that.
I agree. There's so little of that in our culture, but like there's this little pocket in New Orleans where I feel like they lean into it.
Yeah. And I remember at my mother's funeral, everybody was dressed in black with the exception of two women who had cared for my mother at the end of her life. And they were from, I don't want to get it wrong, so I won't even say, but they were from a different country. I was up there giving a eulogy and I looked out at the sea of people wearing black. And in the very last row were these two women wearing all white with white hats. And I spotted them because they stood out and they were radiant. And I loved it so much because it felt like they were embodying the beauty and vibrancy of my mother, where everybody, and I understand, obviously, you know, what our tradition does, but everybody was just, you know, it was so bleak. And then there they were in the back in white. And I thought that was super cool.
That is kind of interesting. This is sort of like my final question thought, right? Like, so as I think about this, right, I think about this whole life out there, right? Like this, you know, and I think I'd said to you before I started talking, like I'd watched this one reel of another grief podcast where the host was like, you don't just die. Like you don't just disappear. Like you don't just cease to exist. Like, so whether you believe in heaven or whether you believe in any other place or whether you believe in energy or like however you think of it, there's more. And I think all of these stories, whether it's my dreams or your experience with the priestess or the media, everything in between, like there's this other place.
And I can tell this is like the beginning of a conversation you and I are going to continue having for quite a long time. And I will say what is interesting to me is, does the consciousness survive bodily death? You know, because it is quite clear that we are made up almost entirely of energy, and we know energy isn't created or destroyed. We know that the energy goes into another form, but is consciousness out there somewhere? And that's what I'm hopeful about.
No, so hopeful about it. And I love that you had that experience with Dalia where you felt it was her and it gave you that feeling. And even the fact that you've got this tangible recording.
Yeah.
Like, do you re-listen? Because I think I might get obsessed. Like, I don't know.
I've listened a couple of times, but I totally see how people get addicted to this stuff.
And now I just have this like vision, right, of like Dalia and Jake together. And like, I do find such peace in thinking of like these other people that like we have met in this journey and knowing that they're all up there. I say up there. I don't know, that they're all together, right?
I interviewed a person named Larry Carlat on my show and listened to that episode because his child took his life at 27. And Larry tells a story about connecting with his son, Rob, and Rob being with some children of other grieving parents. It's a whole
really?
Thing. Yes. So check it out.
It is a thing. Okay. That makes me feel even better about it. Cause like in my head, I'm always like, oh, well, now you're together. Like,
yeah, I totally agree. And then it's like, but they didn't know each other, but maybe they do now.
So I am so grateful that you have shared this with me. Like I wanted to have a very specific conversation, right? Because I think so many times on the show, they're all unique conversations, but they're in the rare disease journey or they're in the loss. This, I was like, I wanted to get really like nitty gritty with this because I think there's people who are wholeheartedly into it. I think there's people who are dabbling in it. Well, and then there's people who are like kind of scared of it. And then there's people who just don't believe at all. But right. I think everybody has like, it's in people's thoughts.
I totally agree. If we can get over the hurdle of just being totally closed off and at least open ourselves a little bit to the possibility, that's where the interesting things begin to happen. Yeah, to be continued for sure.
To be continued.
Thank you for letting me talk about all this stuff.
No, thank you for agreeing to come on. When I emailed you, I was like, she's either going to think I'm nuts or she's going to be like, here for it. So, yeah. I am so grateful for you sharing that experience with us. I'm excited for some adventures with you. I think we've got a whole lot to explore.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show again. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to A Place of Yes. Please follow us wherever you listen to your podcasts. If you really like this episode, please share it with a friend. It would make a world of difference if we could just reach more people and share the work that we do and the stories we want to tell. Thank you so much for watching.